Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Five Journeys podcast, Live Like You Matter. I am delighted today to have Sharon Lechter on the podcast. Ed can't join us today. He's a kid schlepper, so it's just me and Sharon, so we'll have some girl bonding. Sharon Lechter is a author of 27 books, 5 times New York Times bestseller, and she's my personal mentor. And it was one of those magical moments where I heard her speak, and Ed asked me a question as she was speaking. I was like, be quiet. She's talking. I need to listen to this woman. And that was the moment where I fell in love and I said, I need to work with this woman. And that was last year. So we've been working together for about 8 months. And I'm just delighted to have you here because it's such a privilege to work with you and be with you. And you're expert on financial well-being and health. And so welcome to the show, first off, so we can kick it off. Tell me your story.
Well, good morning, Wendy. And I'm so happy to be with you. And I'm so proud of you guys. What you are just changing the world, and not just one person at a time, but millions at a time. And I'm so excited about what you guys are doing and what we're learning from you. You know, that's a mentor can share expertise and knowledge, but also I'm learning tons from just working with you. So I really value the relationship. And my story starts a long time ago. As a very little child, I lived in a little tiny house between my mom's beauty shop and my dad's used car lot. And I used to have to go scrub out bathrooms and build rental houses that we had between tenants. So I tell people I've been a real estate investor since I was 8. But I swore I would never be an entrepreneur because I hated where we lived. I was embarrassed. My friends' parents were CEOs and military officers, and I was always a little bit jealous. But I said it gave me drive to say, okay, I want to succeed. So I was the first generation, my sister and I, to go to college, and I got my degree in accounting, one of the very few women in any of my classes. And then I started my career in public accounting in Atlanta, and I was hot stuff. I was only the 4th woman ever hired, so it was really trailblazing for other women. But about the ripe old age of 25, I was highly successful, but not in control of my life, working incredibly long hours and at the beck and call of the other partners. And one of my clients called me and said he was buying a company out of bankruptcy and invited me to join him. And I went back to my condo and did the pros and cons, and didn't help me a bit because I could argue both sides, stay where I was and maintain my success there, but not feel in control, or take a chance, take that road less traveled. And so the pros and cons didn't help me, but my hand took off across the top of the page and wrote, why not? And that is still my mantra today. And I think it truly is an example of all entrepreneurs. Why not do something other people haven't done? Why not solve a problem or serve a need? And at that time, all of a sudden, my parents looked really smart. And I realized the incredible lessons I learned growing up about assets, about passive income, about appreciation that most people didn't understand. And so I was really treasured the education that I had gotten at home and realized that I needed to help other people learn that too. But that's when I made the decision to take off and to go with the client. And it was a really bad business decision because when I got up there, I found all kinds of corruption. But had I not made that decision, worst business decision, I wouldn't have met Michael Lechter. And we just celebrated 43 years together. And he was an attorney in a litigation on the other side of the lawsuit, by the way, but it was love at first sight. And had I not made a business mistake, I wouldn't have gotten my best life decision. So we all have things happen to us. We call them failures, but they're just learning opportunities, and they help you create the life that you want. And so that's part of the process. So left.
Wait, Sharon, I have a question. Wait.
Okay.
So when you say it wasn't a good business decision, is that because there was all this corruption or for some other reason? What was it that made it bad?
Well, I had just literally newly minted CPA, a woman CPA. So I was really I was truly a trailblazer. And then I find myself in this position as an officer in a company where I was discovering corruption. And so had I stayed there, I could have opened myself up to losing my license and corruption and being held responsible. So I knew I had to exit that.
Do you think that they picked you because they thought you would be pliable? Now, knowing you, I would never pick you thinking you'd be pliable, but in your 20s, Did they pick you because they thought they could get it by you?
Well, that would make sense to think that, but the client who picked me did not live where the company was, and he wanted a watchdog. So he had tremendous faith and confidence in me. And so I was there to help protect his interest, and would have, obviously, but when I found the corruption, I had to exit. And then not knowing what to do. And so I actually ran away for a few days to say I was embarrassed. I knew I could go back to Cooper's and Library in Atlanta, but I'd feel like going back with tail between my legs. So that wasn't a good option for me. And so I thought, what do I do? I literally was only gone for a couple of months when I realized I could not stay. And so, and that was what the gift from God that gave me was I came back and really knew I had to leave, but didn't know what I was going to do. And there, literally, I tell people, Mike and I had met when he was going through my drawers because he was in my office doing discovery in this lawsuit. And I came in and met him when he was going through my drawers. And so we talk about that and laugh about that a lot. But we truly met, handshake, and it was electric, and it was love at first sight. So my worst business decision became my best life decision. So
it always works out. That's how I feel. It always works out.
Yeah,
okay.
You have to just not allow yourself to live in the stress and fear, because that not only doesn't get you moving in the right direction, it also impacts your health in a negative way. And that's something I learned. I had to learn that, and I still teach myself that all the time because I was a champion worrier. I get stressed out about something. And now it's like I realized to worry is to pray for what you don't want.
Yes.
And, it's like your own little personal rototiller, and it makes yourself sick. So now I stop myself when I'm worrying and say, let's reprogram the brain. Instead of thinking about what I don't want to have happen, let's focus on what I do want to have happen. And it's actually magic because your mind can't hold positive and negative at the same time. So
it actually is magical, retraining your brain. So, okay. So you're someone who's worked hard on training your brain, but how did you go from being an unemployed 25-year-old CPA to a very successful businesswoman? What happened?
Mike and I got married, and so I became an instant mom, which was fantastic. And I started on my entrepreneurial journey. We met the inventor of the first talking children's book, and I joined forces with him and helped him grow that around the world by collaborating and doing deals with Disney, Warner Brothers, Sesame Street, and sold that company. And that's in 1991. We moved to Arizona. At the time, our oldest son went off to college, came home in December in credit card debt. We didn't even know he had credit cards. So he'd gone to college, and there was this table, free pizza, free money, free t-shirt, free money. So he had a really good time his first semester in college. And then he realized that money wasn't so free. So it took him a long time to get out of debt. But that was December of 1992. And that's when I dedicated the rest of my career to financial literacy and financial education, because I thought I had taught him about money, and I didn't have credit cards when I was in college. And so I realized how much we need our disservice we're doing for our children by not teaching them about money. And that became my passion, my mission, and I'm as committed to it today as I was then.
So what did you do to teach your kids about money?
Well, I started, when I was growing up, I had a part-time job from age 15 on. So my parents' rule was you keep half and you save half. So when I graduated from college, I had $22,000 of my own money to be able to start my life. And so we had that same rule with our kids, and understanding that if you want something, you need to work towards it and buy it so that you build up the self-esteem. But we did not understand the draw, the sexiness of this free money. And that's something that became very apparent to me and really made me angry. When I get mad about something, I usually start a new company. So that's how I dedicated myself. I started working with school systems. And then you fast forward a few years in 1996. Michael had called me because he had a meeting with this guy that had an idea for a board game, and it was Robert Kiyosaki. So I met Robert at the beta test for the game Cash Flow, and it was exactly what I was teaching. It was a perfect tool. And so I volunteered to help him commercialize it because I had all the connections and the contacts from the Talking Children's book, because we also did games. And it was just wonderful. We became partners for 10 years. We wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad actually as a brochure to sell the game. We didn't realize it was going to take off and become, have a life of its own. But we wrote 15 books together, and we were partners, and I was the CEO of the company, driving it and growing it. And it was an incredible journey over those 10 years, building the world's largest personal finance brand. But in 2007, it's important to understand you have to stay true to your own personal mission. And our missions were no longer aligned. He wanted to go into franchising. And so I made the decision to leave at the height of our success, not knowing what was in front of me. But I never regretted the decision. It was difficult for over a year when we separated, and then ended up in litigation. But I made the right decision because I was true to me, and I was standing in my own power. And had I not made that decision to leave, I wouldn't have gotten the call from President Bush inviting me to the very first President's Advisory Council on Financial Literacy. And I served both Bush and Obama in that capacity. So it's like sometimes you have to close the door to allow other doors to open.
It's like dating. You can't meet the person of your dreams if someone else is occupying the seat. The universe does not work that way.
That's right.
Okay, so there's a couple of rules that I've heard from you so far. One, that it's important as you make money to put some aside, and whatever that purpose is for, either you're saving for something or a rainy day or for financial backup or peace of mind, whatever. That's one rule. Another rule is don't stick around when things are wrong. Get out
Absolutely.
when things are, get out, trust yourself. Really trust yourself is the rule. Get out.
It is not what you do for your paycheck that determines your financial future. It's what you do with your paycheck that determines your financial future. And so with every dollar that comes into your life, you can spend it and never see it again, or you can invest it and allow it to grow and work for you. And that's why most people chase income and paychecks and salaries. And I want them to instead chase assets. Income producing assets. So yes, have a salary, but reinvest that salary into income producing assets, because you're financially free when the income from your assets exceeds your monthly expenses. Then you can choose to work because you want to, not because you have to. And it's that concept is something I grew up with. Most people don't understand it. They need more money, they get a second job, or they ask for overtime. And that's you're your only asset. And there's only 7 days in the week and 24 hours in a day, and you get tired and you give up your health, you give up your relationships because you're focused on the almighty dollar. And if you can, at an early age, start thinking about take the money that comes in, give some to charity, invest some for your future, and then cover your daily expenses. You'll be way ahead of the game when you're in your 40s and 50s and 60s.
So let's drill into this, Sharon. So when you talk about investing for your future, you're into assets. What do you consider to be an asset? I've heard you say assets are sexy. I have the t-shirt, I'm not wearing it today. I should have worn it for the podcast. The assets are sexy shirt. So what do you consider to be an asset?
Well, assets are several categories. First, businesses. If you own a business, that's an asset. You want to make sure it's a true business where other people work for you and systems work for you, so that you're not just owning a job. Real estate. If you have investment real estate, so you have a tenant that's renting from you. Let's say it's a house. They're paying you $1,000 a month in rent, and your expenses are $500. You're getting $500 positive cash flow every month. That's an asset. Paper assets, stocks, bonds, mutual funds IRAs, 401ks, they're all basically paper assets that generate hopefully a positive cash flow to you. This last year, not so much, but we continue. And over time, the stock market has been a good investment. And then intellectual property, which is a huge one and something that I really help people understand how to take what you know, your expertise, and turn it into an income producing asset. For instance, the Dirty Girl book is a perfect way of you expanding your intellectual property into an asset so people around the world can access your brilliance 24/7 and not disturb you. So it's interesting, that's how you can truly leverage your expertise and exponentially increase your impact. So all of those categories, and now we have to kind of add digital currency there. Any given day, it's an asset or a liability, depending on where it is.
But it's a liability today, but wait 10 minutes. It's like the weather in Boston. It will change.
So all of those things are assets. And so most financial planners tell you to diversify your assets, but they're talking about different types of paper assets. And that's only a piece of the picture. I teach diversification across asset categories. So have a business, have paper assets, have investment real estate. And now you can invest in real estate through a REIT. So it's not the big giant house you own, but you own a piece of a large apartment complex. So those kinds of things allow you to diversify. So when there is a crash in one market, the other ones keep you afloat.
So what do you say to people who are it's the bookends of someone's financial world are very similar, because the early starting out and the coming to the end of one's career kind of mirror each other in terms of extra cash often. What do you tell people who say, well, I don't know that I have money to invest, or I'm living paycheck to paycheck? Where does the freedom come in? And the ability
I want to change that story. So the ending bookend is much bigger, right? So that when you start investing in assets, those assets start working for you and they pile up, and all of a sudden your income is being replaced by income from your assets. And so when you retire, you don't have a drop in living. You have the ability to maintain your style of living because those assets continue to work and generate income for you. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people do chase the money as a salary. They work hard and they get to the end of their career and they say, is this all there is? They haven't been able, the old defined pensions are no longer a thing available to people. And so if you don't put the money aside for yourself, you don't have it. And many people are having to work, not choosing to work, having to work way into their 60s, 70s because they can't afford to retire. And let's reverse that by starting to invest in assets that grow and maintain. And it's like they become your employees working for you, but you don't have personality problems to deal with. And that's the message that I teach. So let's build your assets so that when you decide to stop working, your quality of life doesn't change because those assets are there generating income for you.
Okay, so can we drill into this? Because if you're obviously, it makes sense if your company provides a 401k or some type of investment vehicle for you to participate in, especially if they match, you take advantage of that. So it sounds like you would say, sure, max it out if you can. However, it almost sounds like there's benefit to maxing whatever they are matching. And then if you have extra money, putting that into some other vehicle, either real estate or intellectual property, or starting your own business, that you're not putting everything into just your retirement account necessarily.
Well, and there are people who choose to do that. And the issue there is, your financial future, your money needs to always be moving in momentum. And if you put everything into your 401k, you're tied to one manager's decision-making ability. And that's what I don't like that. I'm a control freak. I admit it. But for me to put all my money into one basket and rely on one person sitting behind a desk who may not be there next year, might be replaced by somebody new, makes me nervous. So yes, max out your 401k, particularly if your company matches it. And because that gives you the tax deduction of what you're putting into the 401k, it gives you free money from your employer, but don't rely on that for your financial future. All right. Have a side business, have your additional, your bonuses, your additional raises, turn that into an investment portfolio outside your 401k that gives you an additional depth of assets to support you.
What do you recommend for people who aren't at the level of being able to put 20% down for some type of physical asset? What do you say to them? Do you say band up with your friends or put less down? How do you get from 0 to 10 to 20%? Or is it even that you do that? Or what do you recommend for people?
Well, if you're talking about investing in real estate, if you don't have the money to go on a down payment, there are several things you can do. You can find a partner who knows about real estate, that they don't have the time and energy to do the hands-on work. So they put down the money and you do the hands-on work to manage a property. But that takes a lot of work. And if you don't have any knowledge about it, you might learn a few hard lessons along the way. There are syndications available to invest in. Many of them are high dollar amounts, but there now are many that are more crowdfunding based so that you can get involved with a very small amount of money. To the point of also investing in REITs, REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, which is kind of like buying a stock, but you're buying into a real estate investment trust that may be centralized in industrial buildings, or it might be focused on multifamily housing. And so you're looking and tracking an industry and you're putting your money into a large pool, but you still have the advantage of the fact that you're now investing in real estate in a small amount of money. So there's so many more ways to invest in real estate today than there were even 10 years ago. And so there is no excuse for people to say, I don't have the money to invest in real estate. Right? You may not have the money to buy a building on your own, but you still have some money you can invest in real estate.
Okay. So when you're investing in a REIT, it sounds like you could say, okay, I'm interested in evolving technologies. I'm interested in real estate that is as clean as possible. So I'm going to put my money into something that resonates for my philosophy. Is that accurate? I think you can.
There are real estate investment trusts that are focused on what's the certification for
sustainability
buildings?
It's the LEED certification.
Yes, LEED certifications. There are for companies that are committed to the smallest footprint in energy. So yes, you just have to look for those if that's your passion. And I recommend do that because then you're investing in what you believe in. There are people that invest in farmland because they want to ensure the future of our farming in America. There are people that invest in technology-based companies because they want to be part of the future. That's not necessarily a REIT because it may not be real estate involved, but real estate investment trusts most of them focus in a particular type of real estate, not all of them. Some are focused on storage units, all right? Others are focused on industrial buildings, but some are mixed use. So again, do your homework. And one of the things I really encourage people is find a real estate investment group around you. There's a group here, ASREA, Arizona Real Estate Association. They have monthly meetings, and you can learn so much by just going and attending and learn about potential investments in your area, learn about things that are going on, get yourself educated. You won't get educated if you don't spend the time.
Got it. So what do you tell people who are struggling? Let me back up, Sharon. Have you had any points in your life where financially there were some big challenges? You grew up and you weren't the shishi. Your parents weren't the CEOs, except it sounds as though you had cash flow and assets already working. So you weren't in a spot where you were in a spot.
Well, growing up, we were very lower middle class. And I remember my sister's 4 years older than I am, and she wanted to go to a private college. And so my parents paid for her to go there. And I remember listening to them talk when they didn't realize I was listening about all the cuts they were having to make. And, we'd have vegetables for dinner multiple nights a week. I know that sounds popular today, but back then we were meats and potato and vegetables. So there were times when we couldn't have protein because we didn't have the money. And so those were struggling days. And I was very much aware of it at that time. And it was my mom had her business, her beauty shop, and then she brought in other hairdressers. So that helped her leverage it, become an asset. My dad had a mechanics shop next door to our house, and he had a used car lot that helped him give additional revenue. Then we have multiple houses that we had real estate rentals. And then he had this piece of property called an orange grove out in the middle of nowhere in South Orlando. And I kept saying, Dad, why do you own that? It's out in the middle of nowhere. And he said, well, the oranges give me cash flow every year. And I know that the city's going to be developing and is going to grow in this area. And I thought, well, that's kind of, okay. I was still more of the here and now mindset, not for the future mindset. And that orange grove is now part of SeaWorld. So it was like he had this incredible vision. And then he bought a property to live on that was one of the largest pieces of the Winter Park, Florida, that was undeveloped. And that's where he passed away. And we ended up being able to develop that. So he had a beautiful vision for the future and understanding how things would grow in value. And so coming from a place where he didn't even have a high school diploma, he joined the Navy a year early, kind of lied about his age, but he ended up running the engineering school for the Navy. So he was totally self-taught, brilliant man. He was by far my most important and most impactful mentor. But my respect for him, I felt really terrible about it for years because I realized how much I learned from them and how much they knew that most people didn't. And the gift that he gave us, my sister and I, to understand money and how it works. And so I think it's really important for people to think about what's your future like? And certainly in today's world, we may not be able to control the international economy or the state economy or even our city, but we can control what's in our wallets. And so we've become a society of victim mentality. Everything's everybody else's fault. I want you to be a victor, stand in your own power, and take control of your finances, because it's pretty simple. You're either in control of your money or it's in control of you. There's not much in between. And too many people are controlled by their money. They lose their health. Let's get back to what you do. They lose their health because they're scared to death about money. A recent survey showed millennials and Gen Zs, 80 to 85% of them are worried about money. That's their number one concern. That wasn't that way 10 years ago. The younger generations, they had this fairy tale vision of their future. And yet today, these younger kids are scared to death. Plus, we have increase of mental health issues. And so I'm really worried about them because we need to teach them the tools they need to succeed, or they will have even more health problems.
Right. It becomes this rat wheel that you start to run on. So you have concern about money. That makes you anxious. That makes you perform poorer. Then you may not get the opportunities because you're not performing at your peak. And then you're more worried about money. So you've just now danced on the rat wheel, and the faster you run, the faster you run. And that's it. So I have a lot of questions, but let me think about, what do you recommend people do when I'm looking for access to power at the moment when you don't have any power. That's what I'm trying to drill into. What's that moment where people can say, okay, I'm on the rat wheel. It's not working for me. I need to get off the rat wheel. How do people get off the rat wheel, or how do they go from victim to victor?
Well,
where is that?
The first book I wrote with the Napoleon Hill Foundation after leaving Rich Dad was called 3 Feet from Gold. And in it, I discussed the personal success equation. And I share this in every speech, every interview, because it really helps people focus on their personal life. And the equation is P plus T, your passion and your talent. So my passion actually came from anger. I was mad we weren't teaching kids about money. My talent was years as a CPA, years in publishing. And most of us stop there because we think we have to do it on our own. Hence the rat race, being on the wheel. We have to do it all by ourselves because that's what school taught us. But true success comes from it, taking your passion and your talent and finding the right associations. Times A, the power of association. Who are you working with? Who's your mentor? Who do you align yourself with? Who do you bring onto your team? Bringing people in who are strong where you are weak. That's how you have exponential success. And then times A, taking action. How many times do we know what we're supposed to do? We just don't do it, right? And I feel busted every time I share that. So you have your passion and your talent, the right associations, taking action, and then there's a plus F with all of it. And that's faith, having faith in yourself, having faith in what you're doing that is needed and necessary, and having faith that you will succeed. And usually people are lacking in their associations and their self-confidence, and they kind of go hand in hand. When you have the right people around you and you have a bad day, we all have bad days, they won't let you stay there. They pull you right back up. And that's the essence of success, is knowing that you are in the right environment. You have the right people around you, helping challenge you, all right, opening doors for you. Don't be the smartest person in the room. And then have that confidence that what you're doing is needed and necessary, and realizing that you have a gift. Everybody watching and listening right now, you were brought here to be the perfect rendition of you, not someone else. And in today's world, we're way too interested in trying to be like someone else. Be yourself. You have a gift. And whatever you have gone through, whatever has stopped you in your tracks along the way, you're still here for a reason. It took me a long time to find that because I lost a son 10 years ago, and it took me several years to get out of that level of grief. But I heard him in my ear saying, "Get over it, Mom, there's more for you to do." And that's when I started having this message for people that whatever we've been through, we survived it, whether it was a death, a divorce, a financial setback, an illness. And so you have a story to tell, and you can help other people that are going through the same thing. But the first step when you are in that hole is stop digging, start asking for help. Find somebody that can help educate you. Find somebody that can help mentor you. Get a book, start reading, filling your brain with possibility, not fear. Because when you bring in that hope and possibility, the fear gets pushed out. And that's what I want people to do.
I always say to my patients, I talk to women all day, right? And they say to me, "What if blah, blah?" And one of my patients said to me, she had 4 kids. She still has 4 kids. And 2 were on the autism spectrum. So they weren't as independent as she would hope. So now they're grown. They're 20 years old. And she and her husband decide they're going to take a vacation. And she says to me, she's like leaving in a week. She says, "Wendy, what if they burn the house down?" I said, "You are asking the wrong question." If you ask a bad question, you're going to get a bad answer. So the question isn't what if they burn the house down, because all what if questions send your brain into victimhood and panic. What you need to ask is, have I given them the tools they need to be safe while I'm away? And what would they do if the house set on fire? Have I trained them to react properly in an emergency? And what do I need to train them in so that that doesn't happen? Those are the questions to ask, because what if questions are not answerable. But how to and how would I and what would I do if gives your brain the opportunity to chew and give you answers.
So true. Yeah,
right?
So true. I teach people, how many times have you said, "I can't afford it"? Right? Everybody's busted by that. And so I can't afford it. It's negative. It closes your mind. You want to turn off the lights and get under the covers. And I go, let's retool our brain, because you can control 3 things: your thoughts, your words, your actions. And so let's change your thoughts from "I can't afford it" to "How can I afford it?" And do you feel the difference? When you say "How can I afford it?" you are activating your subconscious mind. And all of a sudden it goes to work, finding a way for you to afford it. And that's the same thing with our children. We tell them, "No, we can't afford it." Then they get all sad and depressed. Instead, say, "Johnny, Mary, how can you afford this?" And let them set a goal, Let them find, they get very creative, by the way, on how they can afford it, but let them find a way to earn the money. Let them buy what they want and then celebrate, because the fringe benefit, the most important part of that process, is the self-confidence you see they develop in that process, setting a goal, achieving it, and celebrating.
I always say to my kids, you're not allowed to, you say you can't do something unless you put yet at the end of it, because yet leaves that door open so that there's possibility and hope and future. Okay. I think we're on the same page, which is why I come to you for mentorship. Okay. So this has been amazing. Is there anything else you want to tell the listeners that we haven't talked about?
Well, I think it's important, when COVID hit, there's such negativity. And I realized that people needed an injection of positivity. So I started something called ATMs. It's it stands for Abundance, Tips, and Mentorship. Kind of a play on an ATM deposit at a bank. And I wanted people to really focus on tuning out the negative, getting out of negative environments, and focusing on the positive, because your subconscious picks up those negative things, even if you're not paying attention to it. I realized years ago, I had pretty much always had the news running in the background, and I was agitated all the time. And it was because all the news was negative and it made me angry. And I said, this is crazy. So, I haven't watched the news in years. I check in on a daily basis to find out what's happening in the world, but it allows me to focus on being productive. It allows me to surround myself with people who are positive, with initiatives that I feel can add value, and I feel so much better. I feel like I'm being of contribution, because when we allow ourselves to become bombarded by negativity, we stop moving. It's like we get paralyzed, because fear either paralyzes us or motivates us. Most of us are paralyzed by fear. And so when you recognize that, say, okay, the fear is here. We're all going to have fear. I recognize it, and I go, I want to turn this into focus and turn that fear into energy to go in the direction that's more positive.
Okay. That's a fantastic place to stop. Like, don't let your brain send you down the rabbit hole, basically.
Yeah, and remember, you can control your thoughts, your words, and your actions. And you can't blame anybody else for those three things. And so if you need to work on it, and the personal success equation, if you go to personalsuccessequation.com, I have a free ebook that helps you walk through your own personal success equation. And I challenge you on a few things for you to find your passion, recognize your talent. So many times you have tremendous talent, but you don't recognize it because you're always talking down on yourself. People need that self-confidence. So let's raise your self-confidence and find those one or two things that you can do. What new association do you need? Do you need a mentor? What do you need to do to elevate your faith in yourself? Therefore, faith in the future.
Mm-hmm. This is great. Where can people find you, Sharon?
Well, my website is SharonLechter.com, and I'm Sharon Lechter on social media. Facebook is author Sharon Lechter. And then you reach out to me by email, info@SharonLechter.com. I'd love to hear from you. My mentoring programs are on my website. So please reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Sharon, thank you for being here. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the 5 Journeys podcast, Live Like You Matter. Can't wait to talk to you again. And for all the listeners, you should follow Sharon because she's wicked smart, as we say in Boston. Thank you for being here, Sharon.
Thank you, sweetheart. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so proud of you and the impact that you're making.
Thank you.